Is keeping the Sabbath something that we should be doing as Christians today? Do I have to go to church on Saturday or Sunday, or does it actually even matter? Join us today to find out the answer. All right, let's answer this question today. Do we have to keep the Sabbath? We're followers of Jesus, but the Bible says in the 10 Commandments about the Sabbath. So is that something that we should be adhering to as followers of Christ? Well, let's talk about that today. And I want to start at the beginning, and I actually mean the literal beginning for us to understand this. We start in Genesis. In Genesis 2, we see, how God creates everything in 6 days. And then on the seventh day, he rests. But then the next time we see that is about 2,500 years later with this whole idea of the day of rest. And that's when Moses comes on the scene. Now, God calls Moses to go into Egypt. The Israelites have been stuck there for 400 years. God says, go get my people out, bring them into the land, the promised land, which is the land of Israel. It would, of course, take 40 years for them to actually get in there. But Moses' job would be to get the people, but then think about this, the people have been slaves. For the last 400 years, they don't know how to live like free people. They know nothing really about God, just bits and pieces what they've heard, So they didn't know how to follow God. They didn't know how to act. So this is what Moses and the law is actually all about. God gives the Israelites, this nation of people that have come out of Egypt, and he's given them over 600 laws. And that's actually where we find what we know as the 10 Commandments. Exodus 20, of course, do not have any other gods before me, do not have idols, do not take God's name in vain. But then we see in Exodus 20, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who's within your gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. And then, of course, he finishes with, honor your father and mother and all of that. So the Sabbath, this whole idea of keeping this seventh day, as a day of rest, was actually part of the law meant for a specific group of people for a specific time. The specific group of people were the Israelites at the time. We know them today as the Jewish people. So now let's fast forward to when Jesus comes on the scene. Jesus shows up, he dies on a cross, he rises from the dead, he ascends back into heaven. And with that, the law that used to be, it was called the Old Covenant, part of this Old Covenant, has now been replaced with a new covenant. And it's where really Jewish people are not under the law anymore. They don't have to be. And we see a lot of them still adhering to that, but they actually don't have to. Because instead, after Jesus died and rose again, then the Holy Spirit came on the scene. And what happens is the Holy Spirit now indwells believers and changes us on the inside. It's not an outward law, a bunch of rules and regulations that we have to keep. We see this in Ezekiel 36. God says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. In other words, you're not going to have to adhere to the old law like that. Now something new is coming. I'm going to put my spirit within you. He goes on, I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will place my spirit within you and cause you to follow my statutes and carefully observe my ordinances. Now, when Jesus shows up on the scene and all of this begins to change, if you were Jewish, this would freak you out, okay? This would be unheard of because you've always followed the law. You believed in the God of Abraham. Like, this is just something you do. And because of the law, part of the law was you would keep the Sabbath. Now, if you are watching this and you actually are a devout Jewish person, you probably still feel today that you're bound by this law. But I'm hoping to free you today because you aren't. You aren't bound by that. The only commands that Jesus says we're to obey is this: love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and love others as yourself. That pretty much encompasses what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to live as followers of Christ. But if you were Jewish when Jesus showed up, this would be very, very confusing to you, because you were raised that to be, right with God, you had to keep the laws, you had to do everything that, that it said. But Paul comes along in Galatians and tells us something interesting. Galatians 3:24. Therefore, the law, what Moses brought, was our tutor to bring us to Christ that we might be justified by faith. But after faith has come, we're no longer under a tutor. In other words, think about this. The law was put into place because with all these over 600 laws, nobody could keep them. We know that. All we have to do is read the Old Testament to see that the Jewish people, the Israelites at the time, could not keep the law. And they were always following, false gods and doing things they weren't supposed to do. Because what the law did is it showed us our sin. It showed us that, how would we know not to commit adultery? How are we to know not to take the Lord's name in vain if the law were not put in place? But along with that, it shows us that we can't keep rules and regulations ourselves. It doesn't work that way. So, when Jesus is born, he's born amidst this whole religious Jewish system. But many of the Jews actually recognized Jesus as their long-awaited Messiah. But what happens is, now there's a lot of questions, tons of questions, because they wanted to know, okay, if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus now, do I still keep the law? Is it the law plus Jesus? Like, do I still, say the Sabbath is important to me? Do I still, what do I do now that I've given my life to Christ? And the answer was, well, it actually doesn't matter. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. An actual day to worship doesn't matter at all anymore, because it's not a bunch of rules and regulations that we have to keep, because we're not under the Old Testament law. In other words, you're free to worship whenever you want to. You're free to worship every day, Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. It doesn't matter. And we see this with the early Christians. Look at Acts 2:46. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. Now, they met on Sundays. They didn't meet on Saturdays, and not on a Sabbath day, okay? They were honoring Jesus' resurrection. That's what this was all about. Look at Acts 20, verse 7. Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, on the first day of the week, this would have been Sunday to them. And so they weren't worshiping on a Saturday. So the book of Acts is just there to show us that there's no specific day involved any longer. And you're not under the law. So you don't have to worship on Saturday night or Sunday morning. It doesn't matter. Galatians 5:1 says this: Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. The law was a yoke of bondage. It was like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But then instead, after Jesus rose from the dead, the Spirit of God lives in us. He changes us, He changes our hearts. It's not a matter of rules and regulations anymore. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says this: Now the Lord is the Spirit, and when the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. Not liberty to go sin, okay, but liberty, there's a lot of things that you're just free to do as a follower of Jesus. Jesus tried to make this clear in Luke 6. Look at this. On a Sabbath, so on that Saturday, he passed through the grain fields. His disciples were picking heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands and eating them. But some of the Pharisees said, Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And Jesus answered them, Haven't you read what David and those who were with him did when he was hungry? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the sacred bread, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat? He even gave some to those who were with him. Then he told them, The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. In other words, he wants them to know it's not about the Sabbath anymore. That Jesus himself is Lord, boss, ruler over the Sabbath. Verse 6, on another Sabbath, Jesus is trying to make it really, this specific day he does things that the Jews think that he's not supposed to do. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and a man who was there, whose right hand was paralyzed. The scribes and Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they could find a charge against him. And he knew their thoughts and told the man with the paralyzed hand, "Get up and stand here." So he got up and stood there, and Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do what is good or to do what is evil, to save life or destroy it?" After looking around at them, he told them, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was restored. This, however, they, however, were filled with rage and started discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus. Because to them, it was religion. It was, I have to keep a bunch of rules. And Jesus is like, it doesn't work like that any longer. Now, Jesus was trying to get through to these people that the Sabbath day is not for that particular time, and it's definitely not for our time now. There's a new covenant. The old covenant was part of the old covenant. Sabbath was part of the old covenant. So think of this. If the Sabbath were really, really so important, I bet God could have raised Jesus on a Saturday instead of a Sunday. But he didn't. Because I think God is really trying to make a point. The old law is out. So, all that to say, go to a church where you can worship on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. It actually doesn't matter. If you're one of those that has to work on Sunday and you can go to church on Saturday, go for it. But don't go because you think it's a part of a law that you have to keep. Because it's not what we're supposed to be doing today. Here's what you need to know is you can't look down on people if they choose to worship on a Saturday or if they choose to worship on a Sunday. Remember, the day doesn't matter. Look at Romans 14:5. He says, one person considers one day to be above another day. Someone else considers every day to be the same. Each one must be fully convinced in his own mind. Now, whatever day you feel most comfortable worshiping, go. It doesn't matter. Look at Colossians 2:16. Therefore, don't let anyone judge you in regard to food and drink in the matter of a festival or a new moon or what? A Sabbath day. He's saying these are just shadows of what was to come. The substance is the Messiah. It's all about Jesus. It's not about what day you actually worship him. So, hopefully that helps you. Hopefully that frees you. Have a really good day.